When you're reading and researching and you come across claims or theories that authors are making, or when you're coming to the end of your research and developing your own theories or constructing some claims for an argument that you want to make, you need to be aware that a really good claim or theory accounts for as much of the evidence as possible. So here's a strategy called question the evidence. And this strategy can be used to stress test a claim in a source that you're reading to see whether how much of the evidence it accounts for, to stress test a theory you're developing or an argument you're constructing. It can also be used to consider what you might use as a turn against in a counter argument in your writing. So the way it works is we put ourselves in the position of a skeptical reader and we ask three questions. Firstly, is there any evidence which could disprove this claim or disprove my theory? Second, are there cases or situations that the evidence doesn't explain? And third, could there be a different interpretation or explanation of this evidence? Based on the answers to those questions, you might consider that the claim is valid. You might consider that your theory or the claim you're reading is only valid in some situations. You might consider that it's generally true, since the exceptions that you've discovered are minor or the evidence against the claim is weak. Or you might decide actually that your claim or theory or the one that you're reading actually needs to be modified so that it explains more of the evidence. If you're constructing an argument as a product and you find either that the claim is only valid in some situations or that it's generally true but there are some exceptions and evidence against it even though it's weak, you might want to consider including a counter argument in your product, especially if your chosen audience is likely to be skeptical of the claim that you're making. So let's look at a model of how we would use at least one of those questions to investigate a claim and come up with a counter argument. Let's just remind ourselves what the structure of an argument is. We have a main thesis that we're arguing. We break that down into body paragraphs, each with a separate argument that supports that thesis. And then each of those separate arguments has a point and sometimes some subpoints. And this theory is going to help us stress test the evidence that supports those points so that we can come up with a possible counter argument if we need to for our writing. Let's remind ourselves what a counter argument looks like. A counter argument has two main moves. Firstly, turn against, where you turn against your own argument in order to challenge it. And then secondly, a turn back, where you turn back to reaffirm your original argument. And each of those is probably supported by a little evidence. So we're going to have a look at the turn against, looking to stress testing some evidence to see if we can come up with a good turn against. So the claim in this model is that plant agriculture has a greater negative impact on water resources than animal agriculture. Okay, so the evidence that we've looked at is nitrogen leaching from fertilizer usually runs into ground, from fertilizer use runs into ground and surface water and leads eventually to eutrophication. But animals don't require fertilizer. The skeptical reader thinks, but I know of these like concentrated animal feeding operations where they feed the animals grain. Doesn't that require fertilizer? So if you do further research, you ask yourself this question: is there any evidence which could disprove my claim? And you find that actually, yes, while some animals graze, industrial scale agriculture actually does feed animals with grains and legumes. They are produced with fertilizer, and in fact, that causes quite a bit of nitrogen leaching. So in those situations, what you discover is that the nitrogen leaching caused by the animals could possibly even be worse than general plant agriculture for the same volume of product. So your conclusion is your claim is only valid in some situations, and you decide based on that you're going to put a counter argument into your writing because you have a skeptical reader. And your turn against is then, admittedly, animals that have been fed grains or legumes produced with fertilizer also contribute to nitrogen leaching and eutrophication. We didn't get a chance to explore the other two questions in this strategy. If you would like to see those modeled, go to the other video, Question the Evidence Extra Model.